Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories, where today, my girlfriend is stalking a podcaster. I'm at a bit of a loss right now, and I'm not sure what to think of the whole situation. So my girlfriend and I have been together for over 10 years now. I would say that it's a good relationship. I trust her fully, but something with her recent behavior has made me feel uncomfortable and uneasy. So it started about 3 weeks ago when she told me that she had found a very interesting podcast that she started listening to. Cool, no problem, right? The thing that I took notice of in the first few days was that she had started wearing noise-canceling headphones all of the time when listening to this podcast, which was unusual for her, but I just left it at that. But after a week or so, it seemed like all she wanted to do was listen to this podcast. She would practically wear her headphones and listen to this show all the way from the time she got home from work to the time that we went to bed. Some nights, she would want to go to bed earlier than myself so that she could bring her headphones with her and listen to the podcast. So all of this felt off to me. I started asking her about this behavior, and I questioned her about it. This continued for about 3 weeks until I felt I needed to look into what was going on. So I decided to check her phone. I basically never do that since I feel complete trust towards her, and we have an open phone policy. So the first thing I noticed was 2 new apps. The first one, as I've understood, is an app that contains juicy love stories that are read by various people. She never mentioned getting this app and paying for a subscription. To be fair, she doesn't mention all the apps she installs, but this one felt a bit different. I felt okay with her having this app if she wanted it. There's nothing wrong with enjoying yourself with this stuff. What caught my eye, however, is who she's following on this app and her favorited stories. It's all from this influencer. I hope that's the correct word. The same man that has the podcast she's listening to. To elaborate a little on his podcast, it's just this guy talking, basically about different subjects. It isn't like the other podcast where there are multiple people talking. This one is just this one guy. So back to the app. I kind of got a bad feeling when I saw her favorited stories. I don't want to go into detail about how raunchy it is, but let's just say it even includes the sound effects and everything. So yeah, I'm not feeling great at this point about all of this. So the other app that I found is an app called Patreon, which I'm sure most of you guys have heard about, but in case you haven't, it's an app where you can support your favorite content creators with money in exchange for exclusive content, I assume. So I checked out her profile on this app, and she has a paid subscription on it for the same guy. His content on Patreon is the same as on the other app. At this point, I feel very uneasy about everything, so I start going through her social media. I noticed that she started following him on every platform. I also noticed that she has sent a message to him on Instagram. The message itself is not flirtatious in any way. She only compliments him on a great podcast and told him he was doing a really important and good job with it. That being said, I know for a fact that if her end goal is a relationship with a person, then she would send him the same kind of message that she sent to this guy to start things off. He hadn't answered her message, so I couldn't tell what the whole situation would lead to, if anything at all. So next, I start checking her browsing history. What I find is that she's been Googling this guy a lot. For many days, her browsing history is basically just filled with this guy and all sorts of information about him. I want to point out that this isn't an unknown behavior on her side. She can sometimes get a bit obsessed with a celebrity, for example, and she can spend almost an entire day Googling stuff about him or her. Really extreme curiosity. So I've seen this behavior before, but this time it felt different. Most likely because of the change in the daily behavior. Listening to the podcast with this guy, sending a message to him. I want to mention that this guy's not really a celebrity. It would be more fair to call him a small influencer or content creator. She usually only Google obsesses about bigger celebrities. Not necessarily the biggest stars, but I've never seen it with someone on this low level. My girlfriend is somewhat into astrology, zodiac, tarot, etc. So one thing I saw in the browsing history which caught my eye was that she had searched for his birthday. When she found it, she had researched for the zodiac sign of that birthday. After that, she had searched for his birthplace. She wasn't able to find the exact birthplace, but she found the area that he was born in. So after this, she searched for cities in that area. Why did she do all of this? Well, after this, I saw that she had visited multiple different romantic compatibility sites where you type in your zodiac along with some other things like city of birth, full name, date of birth, etc. to see how well you match with this person. So she basically has really gone out of the way to be able to do this romantic compatibility thing with this guy. She even searched for a city in the area he was born and just picked one at random since she couldn't find the real city. All this to do this thing. and on multiple sites for compatibility. Now I know that type of thing is perhaps just a fun thing, but considering she's interested in this stuff, it just makes it different somehow. Just seeing on the screen her name and info typed in alongside with his for a romantic match just makes me sick to my stomach. So what do I make of this? Am I crazy for feeling uneasy about this? You're not wrong. This is weird. The level of infatuation and fantasy here would be concerning to me. I'm not sure I would want to be in a relationship with someone who did that. She's spending more time on that guy than on herself in your relationship. It's to the point where she's also financially invested. This is not healthy. It would also make me wonder what would happen if the guy ever replied to her messages, which would then make me wonder what I'm doing in this relationship. I had celebrity crushes when I was a teen, but to get this obsessive when you're 30, it's definitely odd. I'd be a bit concerned about her mental health. Bruh, you really plan to spend the rest of your life with someone like this? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know. This guy's girlfriend sounds like she belongs in an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. Am I the jerk for threatening to quit my job because my wife just randomly quit hers? I'm 35, male. My wife, who's 33, inherited a large chunk of her late father's sizable estate. She made it very clear that the money she inherited was supposed to go to her dad's bloodline, also known as her and our kids, who are 13 and 9, that I'm not entitled to one penny of it. We live in North Dakota, and I make $52,000 a year doing a property management job that I hate. It gets old driving around dealing with tenants who take their frustration out on me because my boss decided to cut corners. My wife worked as an accounts payable clerk making $32,000 a year. She hated her job because there was no growth and it was boring, but she held on to the job to show her dad that she was responsible. Her dad passed away, and now she inherited a 5-bedroom mortgage-free house in another state. It's in one of the most high cost of living areas near a private college where nearly all the students come from East Coast private schools. She rented out the house by bedroom to students and gets $6,000 a month when it's all said and done. The rest of her inheritance is locked in a trust that pays out $15,000 a month. Living in North Dakota, the approximately $252,000 she gets is more than enough to live well. However, I feel my wife has been unfair with how she's handled the money. Right away, she rented herself a BMW, and then she decided she was done cooking and would order out every day. The problem is, I have high cholesterol, and a lot of the foods aren't good for me. And the foods that are good for me, she never leaves enough real leftovers. I can stomach the fact that her inheritance is hers, but it does hurt that I've never resisted picking up the financial burden when I earned more, but she hoards all of her new money. She puts her inheritance disbursements and rent income all into accounts under her name, and meanwhile, our day job incomes kept going into our joint bank accounts. That would make sense, but then she quit her job out of the blue last week. She said that she looked at her boss, who's 50, and that she wasn't cut out to work until she was old like her. She wants to pursue her passion of photography, but doesn't want to earn money from it. So she quit. But the problem is that she quit because she gets $250,000 plus basically effort-free. I don't benefit from that, but still have to pay for the mortgage and other household expenses since she refuses to pay for it, citing it as a joint expense. We got in a fight, and I threatened to quit my job too if we were all quitting jobs now because work is hard. Her rationalization was that she buys takeout every day for us now, so my job was enough to pay for our mortgage. I asked if she wants to upgrade houses like she upgrades cars. I'm guessing the new house won't be in my name. Will I have to pay the maintenance and contribute to mortgage payments? She said I should have to because it would be living expenses that I would benefit from just as much as her. Am I the jerk for being annoyed at her selfishness? Do not quit your job out of spite. That would be dumb. You should immediately create your own account and have all of your checks deposited into that account. No more joint accounts at all. Then decide if you still want to be with her or not. If you do stay, then split all of the bills as evenly as you can. But don't be surprised when she decides she wants to run off with her new money. I'm in your wife's position and have an income from inherited money each month in excess of your wife's. I pay for our entire life, including our cars, mortgage, food, vacation, etc. I choose not to work, but my husband conversely chooses to work in education. From his job, we get wonderful health insurance. I'm incredibly grateful for his contribution. If he were to choose to retire, I would be fine with this. We are a partnership, and I would never treat him this way. Please prioritize yourself and your kids. You are worth so much more than this. Am I the jerk for asking my mother to leave because she won't stop wasting my food? My baby sister just had a baby and our mom came over to help. My sister and her husband live in a tiny apartment with no room for my mom. I agreed to let her stay with me since I live only 8 blocks away. My plan was to Uber her over in the morning and pick her up after work. I only eat 1 meal a day during the week. Supper. I have coffee for breakfast and some fruit for lunch. My mother decided that this was unacceptable. She got up early and went through my fridge and freezer to make me breakfast. I told her that I appreciate it, but that I don't usually eat breakfast. She said that was stupid. I very clearly communicated to her that she was welcome to eat anything in my home, but to please not make me breakfast as it was a waste. She made breakfast the following day. I walked out without eating it. I figured worst case scenario, I could eat it for supper. She threw it out since I didn't eat it. I told her once more to please not waste my food. She made breakfast for me the next day. I asked her if she was developing dementia. She is wasting my food for no good reason. I'm not poor or anything, but wasting food is a pet peeve of mine. She said I was being ungrateful for her help and that she was doing it to be nice since I was letting her stay with me. I explained to her again that I did not need, want, require, or desire breakfast during the week. She said she understood. She made me breakfast the next day. I had had enough. I took her luggage with me when I dropped her off at my sister's home. I told my doorman that my guest was no longer welcome. I got so many messages from her and my sister all day long. Even my dad called me to ask me to change my mind, but I said no. He had to drive up and rent an Airbnb to my sister because my mom was too scared to stay by herself. He's retired, so he didn't miss work or anything. My sister came over alone to talk to me. She said I was being a complete jerk and that I could afford the food my mom was wasting. I said I could, but that I didn't want to. She literally used up 2 months worth of my food. She made up a huge breakfast that I didn't even eat. I keep all of my bacon in individual servings. She thawed out 3 for every breakfast, 1 for her and 2 for me, but I ate none of it. My father has asked me to let her back in. I said I would, under the condition that she understands that my food is completely off limits to her. She can pay for her own food. I said I would make room in the fridge and freezer for her. She said I was being ridiculous and petty. So my dad is staying neutral, but my mom and sister think I'm a jerk. My girlfriend thinks the whole thing is hilarious and refuses to get involved. Not the jerk. Sounds more like your mother was initiating a power play and that she would have continued wasting your food, which she knew bothered you, but that was the point, until you capitulated. Then she would have won. You throwing her out was inconvenient, so of course you had to be the bad guy. But that shouldn't have been necessary if your mother had the least bit of respect for you. People tend to take the easier route, and asking for a reasonable person to capitulate is much easier than asking an unreasonable person to be responsible. I think it's hilarious too, but I don't fault you at all. OP, you're not the jerk. The first time was not listening. The second and third time was your mom trying to exert her will on you. You made yourself clear that you did not want breakfast. She made it anyway and threw it away instead of putting it away for you for dinner just in case. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his mom? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for making my daughter tell her relatives that she isn't graduating? My daughter was supposed to graduate college this semester. We've been talking about her graduation party for basically 7 months now. What she wanted to do and who to invite. We have already sent out the invites and multiple relatives have booked flights to come up. The issue is my daughter isn't graduating. She lied to everyone for at least 4 months. She failed a class that she needs to graduate last semester and didn't inform anyone about it. She told us this yesterday, and the party is in about a month. Everything's been paid for already. So I informed her that she needs to call all of her relatives and explain the situation. If they can't get a refund for their flights, I expect her to offer to pay them back. I also informed her she needs to pay back the rental price since I can't get a refund for some of the stuff. This resulted in a huge argument, and she's calling me a jerk for humiliating her. I explained that it's her fault, and if she informed us months ago, this wouldn't even be happening. My husband thinks I'm being a bit harsh, but he's sticking with me. Edit. She knew she failed the class by break, the first week of December. She had all December, January, February, and this March to inform us and didn't. She continues to plan with us for the graduation party and never informed us she wasn't graduating. It was a core class offered once a year. She will need to take it in the fall. She knew she wasn't graduating. The school isn't letting her walk. She will have to walk at the December one. Multiple people are asking what I would have done if she had informed me. I would have moved the party and helped her figure out how to make the best out of the extra semester. Probably would have looked into it if she can add a quick minor, but can't do that now. Everyone sucks here. Your daughter should have told you she failed the class, but based on your reaction, it sounds like there's a reason she didn't tell you. You may want to look real hard at your relationship with her and why she doesn't trust you enough to talk to you when she has a problem, if you want to maintain a relationship once she heads out and starts her own life. I'm abstaining from voting because I'm too biased. I was a version of your daughter at one point in my life. I didn't tell my parents I didn't graduate because I knew it was going to be a wretched scene. I couldn't communicate with my family. Whenever I tried, I just couldn't make it work. It became easier to lie than damage relationships even more than they already were. Your daughter is embarrassed, probably, and this got out of hand. Having her go through the humiliating punishment you handed out isn't going to change one single thing about her graduation status, but it's probably making your daughter regret being honest with you. It's of course your money and your decision what you do, but this is going to leave a deep wound in your relationship with your daughter if you follow through. Am I the jerk for throwing my son out of the house? I, 40 male, have a son, Jay, who's 16. We live together alone. His mother is not in the picture. I've done my best as a single parent since she disappeared on us when Jay was 4. My son has always been my best friend. I'll admit that I'm not very good at taking an authoritative role. He hasn't ever given me much reason to. He's always been the kind of kid who just needed a guiding hand in the right direction. He's smart, level-headed, and generally a very caring person. Jay has been dating a wonderful girl, E, who's 16, for the better part of 2 years since they met in freshman year. She's nice and respectful, and they seem to get along very well. About 2 weeks ago, they were spending time in the living room and got into a pretty heated argument. E came to me and asked for a ride home. I let Jay know and asked if he's okay. He said he's a bit frustrated and maybe some space would be a good idea. So a quiet drive to her home, she thanked me and I went back home. I asked Jay what happened and he explained the situation. Not gonna put his business out there, just a common argument among couples. And he said he would talk to her once he had a more level head. Everything sounded reasonable. 3 days ago, Jay told me he had a friend coming over. I say no problem and just let me know if he needs anything. I was beat from overtime and knocked out for a bit. I wake up and I hear a woman's voice downstairs. I come downstairs to see Jay kissing an unfamiliar girl. I asked Jay if he could help me with something quickly. He says sure and we head to the garage. I close the door and ask, who is that? Jay says she's just a friend. I ask what's going on with E. He responds, well, maybe this will get her to pull her head out of her backside. I said, all right, that's not how I raised you. You know what you're doing is wrong. I explained, if you don't tell E, I will. This didn't seem to register with him. He shrugged me off and walked off to spend time with his friend. I called E's father and I let him know what was going on. Jay is then on the phone getting into an argument. E breaks up with him. He approaches me, gets mad at me. I tell him to accept responsibility, but he refuses. I tell him to pack up his stuff and that until he learns he owes E an apology and accepts responsibility, he will be staying with his aunt. I take his car keys, my sister picks him up, and he leaves upset. It's been 3 days, and my sister tells me he's still angry and Jay refuses to reach out to me. I spoke with my friend about the situation, and he told me that I should have let it be. Jay knows I don't condone cheating, but maybe my buddy is right. Am I the jerk? Edit. I just got off the phone with my son, and he apologized for crossing a line I had drawn in the sand, by his words. I apologized to him and said while I don't condone cheating, I shouldn't have made him feel like his home is something that can be taken away from him. I expressed that no matter what stage of life, he will always have a place to land on his feet here in our home. I told him I won't interfere in his relationships any further. However, if he chooses to do the wrong thing, do not do it in our home. We had a long conversation, and I think we have a better understanding of each other's boundaries and roles now. My son will remain my best friend. There's no one else I'd rather fish with or spend the afternoon talking to. That's not going to change. His friend was unaware he was in a relationship, and she's really upset with him for using her, and he did apologize to E, but she's obviously very upset, and we'll see how things turn out there. Jay understands that what he did was wrong and is obviously upset facing the consequences of his actions. I'd like to thank everyone for your perspectives. I should have put more thought into what I was doing at the time. I still refuse to allow cheating in my home, but a home is not a possession to be taken away from a person. It's his as much as mine, and I never want him to feel like it's off limits to him again. My sister is, of course, giving us both a bit of grief in her lighthearted way. I think you overreacted. At that age, your kid should never have his home taken away. He's 16 years old and obviously not going to settle down with E. I totally agree with the argument, calling E's dad and setting some sort of punishment over that behavior. What that punishment should be, I don't know. That's the hard part about parenting. Everyone sucks here, but you most of all for forcing your kid to stay elsewhere. The punishment outweighs the crime. My town is getting too expensive for service industry workers. The town I work in is rapidly becoming too expensive for blue-collar and hospitality and service workers. Who else is seeing this happening around them? I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and work in the service industry as a bartender. I'm in my mid-30s. Since I came here about 5 years ago, many of my coworkers have up and left because they simply can't afford the rent anymore, as many of the places that used to be housing for the working class have been bought up and turned into Airbnbs and other short-term rentals. You can get a pretty scummy one-bedroom for $2,000 a month at this point, if you can get anything at all. Tons of local shops have gone under and been replaced by luxury cowboy boot vendors and shady skincare pyramid schemes with young plastic surgery models aggressively grabbing at wealthy people walking by to hawk their products. There's a ton of conspicuous money laundering happening through art galleries. The same people who throw a tantrum when their service in food or hospitality isn't speedy and immaculate are making it impossible for us to live and work here, and I'm going to be really curious to see what happens in the coming years because there are already so many of these wealthy people loudly going on about how nobody wants to work when we're short-staffed and service is slower than usual at my job. Is anyone else living this right now? Is anyone else in a community that's already beyond mine and pricing people out? What are your thoughts? I worked at a diner in an area going through this on a smaller scale. Went under a couple years ago. In the span of a few years, rent in the area nearly doubled. All the apartment complexes were bought out by big companies, flipped with new cabinets, and 2 to 3 times the rent. It was already hard to find a full staff. It quickly became impossible. Every single place to eat in a 5 to 10 minute radius was desperate. The only employees left were 10% bored spouses picking up a part-time job, 90% teenaged kids of considerable wealth who didn't really need to work, and often, but absolutely not always, work ethic was reflective of that. It was fun explaining to that grumpy old jerk coming in for their coffee in the morning, following a stereotypical, "no one wants to work anymore" complaint. No, dude, they just literally can't afford to work here. I had that problem in northern Michigan. I spent almost 2 years trying to find rentals in the town I worked, as I had been driving over an hour to work every day. My shifts were already 12 hours, so the extra 2-hour commute killed my day. Everything was getting bought up by people renting through Airbnbs, literally flooded the market with Airbnbs, to the point where only one-bedroom apartments were left. And because of the newly scarce housing availability, those one-bedroom apartments went from an average of $500 to around $1,500 in a matter of a year or two. I even offered one landlord $400 over their asking price per month out of desperation, but because I did that, he decided to wait to see what other offers he could get. Jerk. I already offered over 40% of what you were asking. His rental sat unused for at least 6 months before I just moved states. Forget Airbnb. I know it wasn't their intent to become a platform for investment businesses to buy up so much property for short-term rentals, but that's what happened. The only way to combat this would be to have anyone intending to Airbnb their property to register with the city and have the city limit the number of Airbnb properties to allow for housing. Just a pipe dream though. I'm in San Diego and it's horrible. I honestly look around and wonder how anybody working fast food or retail affords to live here at all. I make pretty good money at my upscale casual restaurant and I can barely afford life. Same here. Like if I was making the money I am now, even 5 years ago, it would be okay. But even pulling a couple to a few hundred in tips a night, 5 nights a week, I'm barely scraping by. Food is expensive, utilities are through the roof, and my rent is astronomical. And don't get me started on my student loans. One of my best pals works in the industry in San Diego, and he's planning on moving because he can't take it anymore. I just saw a headline today about a job posting in Colorado for $167,000 a year, and they can't fill it because that's not enough to live on in that area. Checking in from Savannah, Georgia to say it's the same situation here. If it's not Airbnbs, it's people selling their $600,000 homes in California, Michigan, or Ohio, wherever, to move here and buy up all of our $350,000 homes because they get so much more for their money. Then they can't understand why their property taxes keep going up after tons of other people do the same thing. Karen demands my asthma inhaler. So the story goes, me, my friend, and our significant others planned a road trip for a couple days. We all had 3 months to plan ahead. For context, my friend's boyfriend and I have asthma. My asthma is so severe that I have disabled parking and an SDIT. I don't know how severe his is, but I feel it's relevant to add that he smokes. Almost every time we all hang out, he asks to use my inhalers, and I give them to him without a second thought. Before we left for the trip, I let my friend know that I didn't have the means to be sharing my inhalers with him. As you've probably already guessed, he asked to use one of my inhalers on the last day of the trip. I gave him one of them to use, and I thought nothing of it until last night, 3 weeks later. So my friend comes to me and she says that as her friend, I could have at least given him a few puffs off my inhaler. I told her that she was coming across as selfish for being upset with me over the inhalers that I rely on and pay for, and I didn't understand how she had any place to be upset when I literally shared my inhaler when he asked. She said that the inhaler that I shared with him wasn't my rescue inhaler, and therefore didn't help him, and she had to watch him suffer on the way home because of it. Asthma medicine shortage aside, I really just don't understand how I was wrong for being concerned about my health too. I love her and we've been friends for a long time, but I just don't see how I was wrong for giving him one inhaler over the other when he didn't even bother to specify which one he wanted. So, am I the jerk for not giving him my rescue inhaler? Edit. A couple of things to add. I know it's not sanitary. I disinfect the inhalers every time they get used. I know you're not supposed to share things like this. It's just not easy to tell someone, hey, I know you can't breathe that great, but I can't give you something that may or may not help you. They've been together for around 3 years and they have kids together. I made sure to establish that I will not be sharing my inhalers with him or anyone else ever again. I haven't yet, but I will be establishing that our friendship is either done or on a break until they learn to appreciate the things I do for them, including, but not limited to, putting their health over mine. There's been a few people who have wondered why I gave him one inhaler over the rescue, even though he never specified. Since this was a while ago, I don't fully remember the details, but I think it was in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. I also have ADHD, so my daily is next to me at night, so I remember to take it in the morning. It was the inhaler that was closest to me, and I wasn't in the mood to put forth the effort to get my rescue inhaler out of my purse or duffel bag. Maybe I was being subconsciously passive-aggressive, I understand that now. Maybe everyone's the jerk in this situation, but my conclusion is this. It's just as much my responsibility to take care of my health as it is his responsibility to take care of his. I would never just let my friend get hurt, but I can do that without putting my life at risk too. Thank you all, you've been a great help. Your asthma requires disabled parking. His asthma allows him to smoke. You are not the same. Not the jerk. Not the jerk. Honestly, you need to cut this friend out of your life immediately. She's more worried about her jerk boyfriend's suffering than about your very life. Doctors don't issue prescriptions for rescue inhalers for funsies. They do it because you could literally get hurt if you have bad asthma attacks. She may have been your friend for a long time, but our actions always show our true values more than any words. Her actions scream, I don't care if you could get hurt from an asthma attack, as long as my boyfriend is okay. My daughter expects me to pay for her college, and I don't know what to do. I, 52 male, have 2 kids, a son who's 26 and a daughter who's 19. When my son went to college, I thought college would open up opportunities and he was supposed to major in computer science, but he failed a bunch of classes and changed his major to something less lucrative. He went out of state, and I now realize that this was a poor investment. I didn't want to make the same mistakes with my daughter. She also wants to do computer science, and last year she got into a foreign university in the UK, which she says is like Stanford over there. Cambridge. I didn't want the same thing to happen to her, so I told her that I can't help her pay for that and to go to a local state university or community college, then transfer. She ended up not going and deferred her admission to see if this year she can get a loan, which I'm not for, but it is her life, or if she can get a scholarship for a better American college. She seems a little annoyed at me since effectively her brother got more money, but that was before I knew better. I can afford the same for her, but it would be tighter now, and I don't want that same thing to happen, especially if it would be for a foreign degree. I suspect the same could happen to her since her brother was typically the brighter one while she just pushed herself the last years of school. Am I the jerk here? You're the jerk. Gee, my daughter wants to go to one of the top universities in the world, but she's not the smart one, and since my son couldn't hack it, clearly she won't either. Good luck maintaining that relationship. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.